Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Daily Energy Markets podcast. It is the 25th of October. We're just past 10:30 a.m. UAE time, and we have Brent crude oil still below $75 a barrel. It's definitely up this week a little bit. Still not really accelerating in any fashion. There's clearly some geopolitical bubbles still giving it an upward pressure this week, but ultimately it seems we're still in a kind of a holding pattern. Let's kick off this morning in Dubai with Dr. Aman Nasri, Managing Director, Middle East of FGE Dubai. Dr. Mann, your thoughts on, obviously we're caught to a great extent in the sort of epicenter of the run into the US election. But looking beyond the US election, which of course is only a few days away, and I'm sure Richard will do us all right and represent us well in his vote. But us few meager citizens here in the outer realms of the Roman Empire, we watch and anticipate in great hope and fear. But nonetheless, Dr. Aman, your thoughts on what gives this market direction after the US election, after November 5th, what happens then?
Yeah, well, everyone has been analyzing, speculating, and discussing the relevance of U.S. election to the oil and gas market. For that matter, U.S. Everyone expects to have impact on the LNG, but that was more of a medium to long term. Obviously, the implications on the political space and relationship U.S., Russia, China, Israel, the Middle East was part of more short-term implication on the oil and gas market energy space. But beyond the US election, before, as we are now, or after, I think what continues to drive the oil market will remain the fundamentals in the as an underlying, which is basically a lot of that is demand. Still, we're end of this October. We're 10 months into the year, and there are still discrepancies somehow huge among people's opinions on how much oil demand has grown this year and next year. So that remains a debate. But also, we're expecting to hear from OPEC Plus soon on what they are going to do with regard to their plan to unwind cuts from December. So I think that will be also imminent, and the market is looking at that. There are expectations. We at FGE, we think that there will be more rollovers and continuous delay to the plan until at least end of next year. Now we could talk about medium term and long term, but for now, we think they should and they would be kicking the can down the road. But that's for the fundamentals. I think everyone is still somehow on their toes and watching what's coming next in the Iran-Israel episode in terms of retaliation and retaliation to retaliation and so on and so forth. So the market seems to see two significant uncertainties. One is upside. If
well, let's get to those in a few minutes. Okay. I want to just bring in Richard Rigoglia, CEO of Matrix Global Holdings, for the other side of the world in California. Richard, your thoughts? I mean, just again picking up on the thesis this morning that this is an oil market that looks a little bit caught in the headlights, right? Headlights, perhaps the U.S. election has, but even pre-October 1st, the Iran attack on Israel, this market was sort of listless and looking for some wind. What do you think is the biggest factor that might give it some firm direction in the aftermath of the U.S. election?
I don't think it goes anywhere. I think the market is stuck. And when I listen to your podcast, you have one person who's saying it's going to $40, and you have another based on too much oversupply, and you have another person who's saying it's going to $140 based on too much inflation. I think what we're seeing is what we've seen for 45 years, which is that OPEC, led by Saudi Arabia and OPEC countries, were able to maintain supply and to match demand. And I think the accumulation of information technologies allowed them to track cargoes now in real time, and they've been able to do that. I think that adjustment is allowing them to not let the market get away from itself. So I think that's really been the key. I think we're stuck in a range, and when you go back and look at price, we are stuck in a real range now. It's a multi-year range caught in this $60 to $90 area. I'll use WTI because I don't look at Brent as much, but Brent the same way. So I think we're back, and I said this to you for the last time. The price of WTI now is exactly what the price was in 1985. It is in an adjusted $20-24 basis. And so I think what we've seen is cartels do work. A cartel does work. And I think if there is an adjustment in a Trump presidency, I think what we'll see is probably significant sanctions on Iran. But that's going to be really, I think, a positive for OPEC. It's going to allow them to put some extra barrels back in the market. It's going to make Iraq and UAE and Saudi maybe a little, make the point that Aman just said is exactly right. They're going to keep on rolling this over. If you put some sanctions on Iran, I think it allows the market them to put those barrels out. But he also made a very good point: retaliation on top of retaliation, and then that's the reason why we're seeing millions of dollars, $100 calls bought. It's one thing to attack Iran; it's another thing to sink a tanker in the Strait of Hormuz. And I think that's kind of where these calls are being bought for. But overall, I think we're in that range, and I think we're stuck here. And I think I tend to think he also made a very good point. I think it's not so much crude as it is natural gas. I think we're about to see a flood of natural gas coming into the marketplace. And I think that's the medium term to outer term, because it's take a while to build those terminals.
Bora Barryman, managing partner, Hormuz Straits Partnership. Same to you, Bora, to get a sense of your sense of the thesis post-U.S. election. I mean, we're listening to Vladimir Putin just a half hour ago. I was listening to his press conference from last night at the end of the BRICS summit in Russia. It doesn't sound like there's going to be any end from his perspective to the Russian invasion of Ukraine. But your thoughts, Bora, after the U.S. election, whoever wins, whatever the outcome, the election's over, does this oil market get direction from anywhere? Silent Bora Barryman. Maybe he's got his mute on, and he thinks he's back in Turkey. He can't talk. I don't know, but
throwing the barbs out there. You can't help yourself, can you? Just can't.
It's Friday. It's Friday. Come on.
I guess so.
When I think
energy,
I think the shale gas, right? And whether that's going to experience any meaningful regulatory paradigm shift or not. I have heard some Biden supporters say he's been very friendly toward the upstream sector in the U.S., but that's debatable, right? So the feeling is that Trump will be warmer toward it and more liberal toward exporting it into the global markets. I think that's what Richard was alluding to. And that's going to kind of reshape a lot of gas market dynamics that will have serious repercussions. But the other feeling I have about a Trump presidency, that it might actually boost the...
This is not necessarily a Trump presidency pitch on my part. It's the fact that
that's the thing. I'm assuming I'm giving away some of my assumptions that he might get the...
In either case, he doesn't come into office till the end of January. But unless he wants to come in earlier and he brings the lads from Oklahoma and they say, screw this, we're not waiting until January. We're taking over in November. I mean, I don't know. But let's just assume November 6th.
I'm not sure that he's meaningfully different than Biden on the trajectory of the U.S. national debt, because that hasn't been a major topic of conversation in the election debates. And he's promising a lot of spending just to a different set of people. and therefore you see the movements in Bitcoin and gold and U.S. Treasuries, etc. And I think the U.S. debt is really the thing that Americans should be talking about, but they're not.
The whole world should be talking about, perhaps. But you're signaling that post November 5th direction in the oil market will come from a growing awareness of inflation and the U.S. debt?
Well, we've experienced in our lifetimes that the major, punches to the oil markets really come at financial crises. and nobody likes that. And there's always this sentimental driver about is there oversupply or not. I think those kind of slowly build, and then what really knocks the price one way or another is access to liquidity or lack of access to liquidity.
Well, the three of us, I mean, Borat and Iman and my connectivity with Lebanon, the three of us are affiliated with countries where, when our childhood, their currencies were pretty bionic. Now they're pretty borderline worthless. Is the US dollar going to follow all of us? Those currencies, perhaps listening to some of the biggest brains in Wall Street, they all seem to expect the US to inflate its way out of this debt. We will have to see where that goes. But Iman, back to reality of the immediacy. Of course, you were going to say a few extra things there about the direction of travel here. The one that I'm looking at perhaps is OPEC plus cohesion. There's been a lot of noise in recent weeks about Iraq, about Kazakhstan, about non-compliance. Can we hold this group together at a time when demand seems to be sort of softening?
Yeah, I think the OPEC Plus will continue, unfortunately, to face the reality that there are reasons, somehow structural, somehow financial, somehow lack of internal proper policy management, however you want to put it, for the non-compliance. The countries that have been non-compliant and overproducing, there were reasons, and those reasons somehow are stronger than just an OPEC plus cohesion or requirement from OPEC plus. Hence, it seems like we're going to continue to see this non-compliance and lack of moving towards not only full compliance, but also compensation. Hence, as I said, there is this decision: should we basically go with the compliance and basically keep rolling and assume with cohesion and keep rolling and assume that basically there will be a time that we can unwind, or go into that, we're gonna push the prices down, give a lesson finally, this words and democracy is not working. We need to push them, force them into cutting production. That's one thing which is overhanging the market, and I guess that's a downside risk to the prices. And obviously, there has been words on Israel attack on Iran, which has multiple dimensions. One is one way they could go is to attack the energy infrastructure, which, in my opinion, will be will trigger a domino effect. And where would that domino stop is a big $1 million question. But it's beyond just attacking cars.
Only a million? Only a million? Jeez. a million barely buys you a cappuccino these days.
Correct. And in my country, a million currency.
Exactly.
Would not get you.
Hence the earlier point. Hence the earlier point.
Yes, these two factors have kept the market range bound in 70, 75, maximum $80 when people were started to get nervous. But we're gonna see going out of this range, up or down, depending on which of those two factors will take the front seat.
Right.
In the coming
Richard,
weeks.
I mean, it does seem, Richard, that the market is basically saying, bar a few moments and through this month, that there doesn't seem that there's a big view that whatever happens in this regional geopolitical face-off, that it's not going to threaten oil supply. At least that seems to be the sentiment in the market. But looking beyond November 5th, Richard, from a demand point of view, is the U.S. economy seems to be doing pretty well. All the macro numbers are pointing in the right directions. So on the demand side, it looks pretty solid. But my question to you is about financial investing in the energy sector. And we've seen a month ago a big push into the shorts. Now we see a lot of push into the options as a hedge. Your thoughts on where the financial markets look at oil now, will look at oil in the coming month post the election?
Really good question. I think that, what's almost happened is as we've seen the transition of the Permian into the hands of the majors, I would almost say, and I don't say this to get myself in trouble, I would say that the majors are now aligned with OPEC, right? They now are going to invest along the lines of OPEC. And to make a point, Bora made a point about economic collapses, which has caused oil prices to fall apart. They have fallen apart. 2008 is the number one. But if you look at 86, 98, 2014, and 2020, Saudi Arabia, in all those situations, they're the ones who came to the table, said, we're done with the cheating. We're going to punish everybody now. That's it. It's over. We're taking the market down. And I was around for 3 of those moves, which they were major moves, and they took the market down instantaneously. Even in 2020, pre-COVID, if you remember that 3-week period, they told Russia, you're over your ski tips. We're taking you down. So to me, it's Saudi, UAE. Are they going to hold on? And I think what Aman said was exactly right. In that regard, I think what we'll see with the Trump presidency is he did not call MBS a pariah. So I think we're going to see the Abraham Accords come back into play. We're going to see a better Saudi-U.S. relationship. But I do think, and you made a very good point about investment, I believe that Oxy, Chevron, or Chevron Oxy now, Hess, now whoever they are now, and Exxon are going to be more OPEC-like. They're going to put their money not so much into the Permian. They'll adjust it accordingly, but they'll put their money in Guyana. They'll put their money here and there. And I think what we're going to see is a balance. And it's almost as if, and I know this is a terrible statement to make, this is the price we're going to be looking at for a very long time. As long as Israel doesn't go bomb the heck out of Iran and take out Kharg Island, and that causes what Amansa was exactly right, the snowball effect. I think we've got a point where investment, understanding of information technology, and the ability to monitor supply demand. What the U.S. demand is, the energy GDP ratio in the U.S. is 0.01 to whatever. Our demand is what it is. It's India, China, Africa, Malaysia. So I think what we're really at is we're in a situation of prices staying in a range, reasonable economic policy, moving away from the green energy policies. I think we're going to find ourselves that they're not going to work economically, and that's going to be another uptick in demand. Less EVs ultimately, and so I think we're in a situation where the investment cycle is going to more track what OPEC does than what they've done, what the U.S. has done historically, which is produce. Except in LNG, which I can see a huge investments in LNG in the U.S. Huge investments.
Bora, the other big sort of question moving beyond the U.S. election is China stimulus. We've seen the sort of early shots of it in recent weeks. We're looking across the Atlantic. The U.S. is on stimulus steroids. It has been for a number of years. Europe. Will China get on the stimulus steroid boat, or will they lag behind? Your thoughts on where China comes into this equation from a demand creation point of view, and the outlook there?
Clearly, China is sort of loosening credit conditions and allowing its population a little more sort of a targeted relief in terms of spending power. As far as I understand, that's mainly going into the real estate sector that needs to kind of have its kinks ironed out. But But it has also gone into equities, hasn't it? So there is a
And
kind of a one.
what could be next? There is a big political leadership meeting at the moment. It feels like China isn't done on the stimulus. That's my sense.
Yes, but you know they have their 5-year plans, and what I definitely see in the market is the increased dominance, or you could say profile, in very interesting energy transition related sectors, you know, power transmission, uh, 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 energy storage, all types of novel technologies that are impacting the carbon intensive industries that we're used to working in, across geographies that I happen to be in the UK, in the Gulf, in Turkey. So I see Chinese firms coming in, active in new areas, and that's all part of, you know, the strategic goals set by the central government there, that investment and innovation should be targeted in these sectors. And I see that bearing fruit, you know, whether you like it or not. As a impartial observer, you see that Chinese policy is bearing fruit. But is that going to impact on greater oil demand? I don't think that's part of their you know, strategic priority to really save the oil market.
No, I think what might be their priority increasingly is how to save the $3 trillion of T-bills they have as the U.S. inflates their way out of their debt mountain. I mean, we all have to make our plans individually and collectively in that outcome. I mean, we're cutting interest rates at a time of full employment in the United States, at a time of record equity markets in the United States. It's only for one reason: inflate the debt, in my opinion. Let's go to the survey question, which sort of tackles the theme of this morning. What happens after November 5th? What will have the biggest impact on oil market direction after the US election is over? One, China's stimulus plans, OPEC plus supply plans, geopolitics, which hovers all the time, or the big unknown contested US election results. What will have the biggest impact on the direction of oil markets after November 5th? One of these four, all of the above, of course, everything's in the box all the time. But what do you think of these four will have the biggest impact come November 6th? Take your pick on that one. Man, the outlook of within regards those four options, your thoughts on any one of them in particular, but also the idea of, you started out your commentary this morning saying that you expect rollover with OPEC plus, as we saw on October 1st, but yet there's a lot of commentary saying, no, this is a moment where Saudi and others want to sort of give a cold shower to the markets and pull everybody into line. Why are you not in that camp? Why do you think it's rollover?
Yeah, I guess we're looking at when it comes to OPEC plus. First of all, the four options that you put there are all going to have an impact, and they will have material impact. Which one is the biggest? I think all of them nearly are contingent on other things, conditional, and those conditions could enlarge or belittle the impact of those. So I can't say in absolute. Those are all conditional.
That's why you got to press the button.
Yes, if this happens, that's number one. If that happens, this is number two.
But
in terms of OPEC plus, I think there are also two options ahead of us. Going with the plan starting from December, or keep rolling over. But there is a third one in the fuzzy environment, is to start and then stop. So one thing is, and that will be testing the market and all of that, or sending the signal but not going all in, meaning that they could start with December, they come out in November and say, you know what, we're going to start with December, and then still the market can absorb some additional barrels. We were short on the crude market in third quarter and still in fourth Q. So we drew inventory. We can build a bit, but going all the way until next November is actually a big task. But they can do that. They can send the signals and start communicating. So as a bargaining chip, saying that this is the plan, we are going to start. The market can absorb that 1 month or even another, and then they pause it, and that could also be an option when it comes to OPEC Plus. Just one comment about Chinese stimulus that you mentioned is that we find whatever has happened so far in the hopeful context, it's not we don't see any significant impact on the energy markets. But what market interpreted was actually earlier announcement of 5% growth target in the release a 6% increase in Chinese crude import quota next year. I want to mention the point that if you look back, that annual target never meant anything. The actual allocation always varied significantly with the targeted release of import quotas. The market perhaps got a bit too excited about, the stimulus is going to push the Chinese crude imports up. No, that's just basically a relatively high bar that they set, and that never they released as much import quotas in the past.
Richard, your thoughts on that? I mean, the survey question, the tongue-in-cheek, but not so much in terms of the contested U.S. election. It's in the narrative. I'm wondering, you're closer to home there, obviously. It doesn't seem to be reflected in any real volatility in the financial markets as a concern. But your thoughts on the survey question, the answers on option, and particularly the one around contested election.
Well, I'll go back. I think to me, it's what OPEC Plus does. So I think that's
right.
That to me is as I said, did I cut myself off here? I think it's the one that's most important. But as far as contested, it's possible. I mean, we're coming down to 3 or 4 states, and a couple of the states don't start counting their absentee ballots to the day of, and so we're looking at Pennsylvania, I think, Georgia. I think there's another one in there, Wisconsin. They're going to be counting. So but I don't think it has effect on demand. I don't think I've lived my life in oil where people always ask me what's going to go on to affect the stock market. I never really asked someone what I think the oil market's going to do to the stock. The stock market's going to do what it's going to do for other reasons. And I think oil is not going to have there'll be no effect on it. I think ultimately what it'll come down to will, and the trades are going to go on and I go back to this, there's some oil natural gas trade here that needs to be put on. I don't know what it is, but there's some trade there where I think we're seeing 2 big pipelines built out of the Permian right now that's going to take all the flare gas. So I think that's being set up now to remove a lot of that gas coming out very soon. So I don't think it comes back down to, I think what OPEC does, it has to do with supply. Demand is an unknown, and it's a better known that we've lived with historically, right? We never knew what demand was until way after the fact. Now we can track airline traffic in a moment's notice and even car traffic. So I think demand is something that we're going to handle. To me, it all comes down to supply. Iman's going to have to tell us what he thinks OPEC Plus is going to do. I think they roll it over. It makes no sense not to, and let the chips fall where they may down the road. I think down the road is, do they get tired of Guyana outproducing them? Do they get tired of other countries kind of taking away? I do think, though, the U.S. production is going to be much more economically driven, price driven, as a function of the large companies deciding that they are not going to produce oil because they understand exactly they're smarter than all of us, right? They understand what OPEC Plus is doing, and I think they want to take some of the pressure off of them so they don't get pressured later on.
Bora, last word to you. It seems to me geopolitics on the list of 4, and the reason I included it was not actually about the Middle East, because I don't think that whoever wins on November 5th has much of a difference with the Middle East outlook, but I think it could have a massive impact on the European war theater outlook in Ukraine with a Trump victory, if that was to happen, or a Harris continuation of Biden land. Your thoughts of the survey question and the geopolitics in Europe, if indeed Trump wins, how big an impact that could be for the European continent from the war in Ukraine perspective, geopolitics perspective?
Yeah, I've been thinking about that, and one of the webinar chat questions was about the divergence of growth outlook between kind of a 3%, 2.5% outlook for the U.S. and just less than 1.5% per annum growth outlook for Europe, and that's driven by the fact that I think America has that dollar stimulus capability, which Europe really doesn't have. And Europe is a rule taker rather than a rule maker. And I'll try to tie this in very briefly into the BRIC summit. A lot of the Western geopolitical think tanks saying it's an anti-Western bloc, but I can't see that India and Brazil or Saudi are part of that. They're just looking to trade beneficially with important economies like Russia and China. And that's no insult intended in that by the countries that want to do that. They're looking for their own benefit in that move. So basically, they want to create a SWIFT before the US dollar was basically engineered to cut out India and China from access to US dollar investment. And finally, I think BRICS could become that payment system level playing field, and ultimately, because it will achieve that, I bookmark my statement. I think Europe and most of the world will join it. I actually even the European Union states, because Brazil wants to sell grains to China, and the world wants cheap energy from Russia.
And OPEC Plus is going to have the biggest impact on oil markets after the US election, according to our survey in this room. Richard de Doglia, always awesome to have you on this stage. Thank you so much. Best of luck with the run into the election. Hopefully it's a smooth and a great example for wonderful democracy. Bora Barryman, thank you so much as always for the UK. Iman Nasri as well. Thank you so much for joining us from the greatest city in the world, Dubai. Thank you guys. Have a great weekend. Brent crude oil up 0.5% this morning in Asian trade, looking to break through 75. Will it end the week above 75? We'll wait to see. Thanks, guys. All the best.
Thank you.
Thank you.